The play on the field, the court, and the ice is just one part of sports. Behind every game are the people hard at work so we can enjoy the action. They're the owners, administrators, agents, broadcasters, and vendors who bring the games to life. Meet them when you go Behind the Game with Patrick Klinger and Dave Boden.
Welcome to Behind the Game, presented by KLN Family Brands, makers of delicious Sweet Chaos popcorn, Wily Wallaby licorice, and for your four-legged family members, Nutrisource Pet Foods. Alongside me, a man who believes the Wisconsin Badgers are going to win the Big Ten football championship this year, but he's also a member of the Flat Earth Society, so there is that. Dave Boden.
Thank you, Patrick, and thanks for throwing cold water all over my hopes and dreams again.
I think there's a better chance that the Earth is flat.
It is probably
than
not
the
our
Badgers
year.
going to win.
It's probably not our year, Patrick. Yeah. So thanks for bringing that up once again. All right, I'm going to move on to more pleasant things.
Please do.
For today. Our guest, Wendy Williams Blackshaw, is a fantastic guest here. She's a leader and strategist known for extensive work in brand creation, marketing, sales for high-profile Minnesota-based organizations. Her career includes leadership roles with the Minnesota Super Bowl Host Committee, Sun Country Airlines, the Mall of America, and she currently serves as CEO of Minnesota Sports and Events. She's recognized for developing iconic brands, raising significant corporate funding, and executing large-scale events such as the 2018 Super Bowl and the 22 Women's Final Four, among others. So, Wendy, you truly have had an impressive, amazing career spanning leadership roles with high-profile organizations and are one of the most respected sports executives in Minnesota. Could you walk us through your journey to get there, some of the pivotal moments or key decisions along the way in your career that led you to where you are today?
Yeah, well, thank you so much. That was wonderful, and it's great to be here with both of you. I often tell my kids, I think the only career where you set out and know what you're doing is like if you're going to be a doctor. Like when I graduated from college, I had actually been a hockey cheerleader at the University of Minnesota, and I met Herb Brooks because I was in the parade in 1980 when they came back from Miracle on Ice, from Lake Placid. And I told him I was looking for a job. He connected me to Stanley Hubbard. I ended up working at Channel 5, and then, every time I had a job, I would meet new people and another job would pop up. There was no plan. It wasn't like I was thinking, next. There was no strategy. But I was fortunate enough to land in some incredible organizations where I learned so much. Also, organizations that were going through turmoil, which actually I learned more at Sun Country Airlines during the Tom Petter's whole crisis and when they went bankrupt. One of the most interesting and educational periods of time I've ever had. And then, from there, Minnesota Super Bowl Host Committee, I'd work with Maureen Bausch at Mall of America. And then in 2019, the CEOs of the convention and visitors bureaus came to me and said, hey, we don't have a permanent sports commission. We have these big events, but we're the only market that doesn't have a permanent one. So every time we have a big event, we have to hire a whole new staff. We don't have that connectivity from partners and sponsors. And why are we doing it this way? Would you be interested? I did not know what I was really saying yes to. I was like, I love sports. That sounds like a great thing. Mm-hmm. I had no staff. We had no money. There was I didn't have a pencil. But I do love sports, and it sounded amazing and challenging. And, sometimes you don't know what you're getting into, and that's a good thing. Because
you had an opportunity to shape it.
Yes, and also I don't know if I would have probably said yes. Having said that, I would have, because it's a dream. It's my dream job, and I pinch myself. I feel so fortunate to, and I think a large part of that and a large part of our team is, especially coming out of the pandemic, coming out of George Floyd, bringing people back to both downtowns, bringing people back into these sporting events. We care so much about Minnesota, and that's really what kind of keeps us going. So it's been amazing.
Hey, Wendy, we're going to dive a little deeper into Minnesota sports and events later on, but you were a big part of Super Bowl 52 that was held here in the Twin Cities. Very cold Super Bowl.
So cold.
What are some of your favorite memories from the Super Bowl? And really, what kind of lessons did you take from it?
Oh, it's a great question. The cold, first of all. We were so nervous that people wouldn't show up. And throughout that whole week of Super Bowl Live, every day got colder. The colder it got, the more people came. It was like Minnesotans were going to say, you know what? This is who we are. We are going down to Super Bowl Live, and it was incredible. We had 1 million people over the course of that 9-day Super Bowl Live event. That was, just the way the state showed up. And I had so many people who live in other places who said that they were so proud to be from Minnesota originally. Like they watched it on TV and just all of the press, how great we kind of showed up, which was amazing. I think also we did some really unique things, like the zip line across Mississippi.
Yep,
that was an idea that came kind of right at the end. And, we thought, how are we even going to do this? But we literally sold out the tickets for that in about 10 minutes. It went so fast. And the first person across was Roger Goodell. So we were hoping like everything was working and, but kind of bringing that unique sort of Minnesota flair, that is one of the things I learned, and I learned that from Maureen. Maureen is one of those leaders that she has 1 million really creative ideas, and probably half of them, she'll say something and you're like, okay, and it turns out to be genius. And I think the zip line was one of those things. And we didn't have a lot of time. How are we going to set it up? How do you run it across the Mississippi? But it all worked out, and it really was just such a great kind of, people still talk about it. Like I just saw the mayor, Jacob Fry was right in his first few weeks of being mayor, and he went across and he just said to me, I ran into him and he was like, it was so much fun. I thought, this is like the greatest job in the whole wide world, being mayor. These are the kind of things I'm going to do. And then of course, the next few years were very difficult, but people still remember that. And it was so much fun. The thing I think I took away from the Super Bowl is we had to raise all the money through corporate sponsorship. So we are one of the few states that does not have permanent long-term funding. And so we had to raise $60 million by going to corporations. And that was the most difficult thing about that job. One of the most difficult things I have ever done, because you have to raise the money. So what I learned from that I've taken into Minnesota sports and events is that just isn't possible. And so we have spent a lot of time at the legislature talking to leaders about, if we want to compete in this arena of large sporting events, we have to figure something out. And we're working on that. But that was a big lesson.
As you talk about it, I think you really did a fantastic job then taking what probably is perceived as a negative about Minnesota when you're competing for these national events is the weather. Right. Our thing. And I think you guys turned it into a celebration of this community and the weather, and that really made it unique.
Well, so
instead of just trying to work around it, 100%. It was celebrated.
And it was like, it's going to be cold.
The colder the better, almost, once it started.
Right. So we're not gonna hide from that. Let's embrace it, and that's where Bold North came. So Bold North became our brand, our icon, and to this day, people still talk about. The governor will use Bold North, which I love. because it was a perfect descriptor, and we embraced it. Now, Super Bowl Sunday literally was one of the coldest days I can remember, and I know there were a lot of grumbling people, but everything is connected by Skyway. We kept on reminding people of that, and people weren't outside that long. So I do know that the NFL does prefer to do things in the warm weather, but we had great feedback from the NFL.
Well, just to turn back to your career just for a minute, as a woman in executive leadership within what's often a male-dominated sports and events industry, what challenges have you personally faced in that environment, and what advice might you offer other women looking to be involved in something that has traditionally been a little bit male-dominated?
I do think in the last probably 5 to 10 years, there has been a surge of women going into sports. I really notice a difference. I worked at the Minnesota North Stars, and at that point in time, it was very much a good old boys club. It really was. And from the owner on down. And there was a sense that in order to move up in the organization, there was only a certain level that a woman could reach. And I realized that pretty early on. It was and not that it was disrespectful or anything like that, but it was very much locker roomish. And so I made the decision not to stay in sports, and then went to Mall of America, which was all women, which was awesome. But the difference between being at the North Stars and now doing this and being in the rooms, it is a lot different. There are a lot more women. What I would say to women have an amazing opportunity if they're interested in sports. And people often ask me, what is your advice? Everyone wants to get into, Patrick, you know this, everyone wants to get into marketing PR. For every sports marketing and PR job, there's 1,000 candidates. I always tell people, get into sales. Get into sales. Now, some people absolutely don't want to sell, but that's what I did. I got into sales, and through sales is how I got into then marketing and PR. If you can sell, for me, it made a huge difference in my career. So I've given that advice to a lot of women who have then gone on to get into partnerships, run, global partnerships for sports organizations. So I think it's changing. Listen, is it still a little bit, a lot more male-dominated? Sure, but I do think it is changing.
Good to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. It's good to see a lot more females in executive positions in sports teams and leagues. Wendy, what's one aspect of your background that people might find surprising that you found to be beneficial in your career?
That's a great question. I do think what I just said, starting out in sales and really honing those skills and learning how to, it's all about relationships. And I don't think that's so surprising, but for me, it was surprising when I started out. I thought it was all kind of like book smart. Like, I need to make sure I know how to, read a spreadsheet, and I need to make sure I know how to do budgets. And no, it's about relationships. I think from a leadership standpoint, it's also people want to work with people that they like. They want to be led by someone that they like and respect. I've worked for a few people who have been leaders that lead with fear, lead with threats and lead with fear. And so learning that is exactly how I do not want to be. Of course, you still have to sometimes have difficult conversations or whatever the case may be, but that has been a key for me that I didn't even realize when I started out, that it really is more about relationships than it is about understanding every single thing. I mean, I remember at Sun Country, we would have these budget meetings, and I would completely panic because I did not understand the technical aspects of airplanes. And finally, and literally, I would be like sick to my stomach during that point in time in the budget meetings. And finally, my CEO said, "What? We didn't hire you to do that. You're in marketing. You don't need," and literally it was like a light bulb. I know it sounds crazy, but I thought I had to know everything. And you don't. You don't. The other thing I will say that I've learned is sometimes in those difficult periods of time, I learned that I had to remind myself it's just business. I think especially when you're young, you tend to take things really personally. And you know what? Sometimes hard decisions have to be made, and it's just business.
That's all great advice. I think you hit a lot of key points. Sales, you're always selling something.
Right.
Ideas, products.
Yourself.
Right. Always. And relationships apply, whatever field, job, industry you're in. So let's talk about Minnesota Sports and Events for a minute and the core mission. And you kind of mentioned a little bit about the founding, but the core mission and vision of Minnesota Sports and Events, and what kind of defines a win for the organization, for the state? How do you decide what types of events that you're looking for and who you need to work with?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So the mission is to bring economic, reputational, and social impact to the state through these large-scale events. So what does that mean? That means for USA Gymnastics Trials that was here last June, we generated $75 million in economic impact, highest hotel occupancy since before the pandemic, huge PR. It was, NBC prime time, the trials were on, and so it was like a love affair with Minneapolis for 5 nights in prime time, as well as social media, all of the outlets that NBC has. And then from a community standpoint, and this is something that's really important to us, we always do something or a number of things to give back to the community, because this is a really powerful platform. So we use that platform to give back. So for gymnastics, we did a clinic with Northside Achievement Zone. Some of these kids had never been in a gymnastics gym. And we took them to a gym. We had the University of Minnesota gymnasts come over and teach them gymnastics, and it was incredible. Those are the kind of things that are, I think, as important as selling the tickets. For World Juniors, we created a program called Assist 26. Every single month leading up to December, we are doing some sort of community initiative. So it's become so much a part of who we are and our brand that, when I talk about our mission, that really is as much as selling the tickets and having the event. How we really decide, we have a bid director who has relationships with all the leagues, with all the national governing bodies. So all he does is meet with all of those people, find out, what bids are coming up. Some of them, obviously, we're not ever going to get. There's some sporting events that work really well in Florida that we're not ever going to have. But then there's some like World Juniors where we are a natural fit. Mm-hmm. We knew the bid was coming, so we put together, almost an RFP, a request for proposal, and all of our economics, everything we're going to do from an ancillary events standpoint, and then we submit. You're usually up against, in that case, I think we're up against 7 or 8 cities. It came down to Seattle and Minneapolis. We were like, we're the state of hockey. Choose us. And we brought the USA Hockey guys to see the governor, which made a big difference. Governor, of course, was like, "Are you meeting with the governor from Washington?" They were like, "No." And Governor Walz was like, "Well,
yep,
there you go." And then we won the bid. There's many times where we don't. And one of the reasons we usually don't typically is because of funding. Yeah.
Speaking of funding, pursuing impactful events is not an inexpensive process.
Right.
Who funds Minnesota Sports and Events?
Right, so that's a great question. So most of our operations we fund through, we have a program called MNSC Champions Council. It's a group of young leaders. They pay, a couple $1,000s a year, and we do all these events. We do networking. So things like that are revenue generators that sort of keep the lights on. From the standpoint of the events, World Juniors, for example, is probably going to be somewhere in the 15, 16 million. And so I talked about the Super Bowl. At that point in time, there was no state funding. There was nothing going on, so we had to raise the money. And when I started Minnesota Sports and Events, basically the corporations, the people that I dealt with for Super Bowl, they're like, enough. We cannot fund all these events. Something else has to happen. We're the only state that does not have that funding mechanism. So we started a strategy of going to the legislature and starting to talk about this. And it took a number of years, but we have been fortunate. We had gymnastics funding. We had WWE SummerSlam is coming next summer. We had funding for that. And then we, this past session, got funding for World Juniors. Without that funding, I am not sure what we would do because we already had the event. But it's impossible to go back every year and ask for a state appropriation for every event. It just isn't feasible. So we are working really hard to look at what are those avenues that can help us get that long-term sustainable funding. That's really important.
So looking at that long-term sustainability and that viewpoint, looking out ahead, what are some of the long-term goals that you have for Minnesota's standing as a host for national and international events? And maybe can you tell us some things that might be on your radar screen as we're looking out ahead?
Yeah, absolutely. There are some really great events coming up, and that is why this funding becomes so important. I talked about there's a possibility that at some point we might get the NFL draft. It was just in Green Bay. It was incredible. This is such a football town. That just excites me. It would be amazing. That's a ways out. We also are looking at FIFA Women's World Cup. That would be in 2031. Men's and women's World Rugby. Rugby is on the rise, especially in the United States and Minnesota especially. We had the rugby people come in. They fell in love with the city, with everything we have to offer. So that's one that we're also looking at. You know, international figure skating championships, the gymnastics trials again, swimming trials for the Olympics. The list, you know, men's Final Four, women's Final Four, the list goes on and on and on. But we can't do it if we have to tell the NCAA, you know, we don't have the money. We're going to go to the legislature and we hope to get the money, but we don't know. We have lost many, many bids because of that. And there is an understanding of how much these bring to the market. You know, gymnastics is a great example. $75 million economic impact. The state gave us $6 million because it cost about $8 million. The state gave us $6 million. We gave the state back in tax revenue $5.75 million. So it was paid back. You know, is there a mechanism that we can create where we are always kind of putting the money back into that pot? Because, you know, all of the tax revenue that is generated through these events is significant, and it can pay the state back.
Minnesota Sports and Events not only has to attract the events to Minnesota, but then you have to make sure that they are successful. And case in point is the World Junior Hockey Championships, right? That's coming to Grand Casino Arena.
Yes. Oh, good. Very good. That was impressive.
Yeah. It's coming in late December and runs into January.
Right.
That must put some additional pressure on you. So you brought the event. Now it's got to be successful. You've got to help sell tickets.
Right.
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 Tell me, you know, is what's happening with Canada right now? You know, there's a little bit of bad blood over the last couple of months. This is the tariff issue. Do you sense that that's having an impact on ticket sales? You
know, it's hard to say because also I think the dollar is not strong, and in Canada, and so I think that has an impact. I do think Canadians love their hockey. I mean, we went to Ottawa. It was in Ottawa last year, and I had people tell me, Canadians are the nicest people outside of the arena, in the arena. And I'm thinking, I've been to a Philadelphia Eagles game. How bad could it be?
Yeah.
Brutal. I mean, this is like life and death. I've never seen anything like it. They love their hockey. And Canada came in 5th, and it was like the world had ended. So the Canadians do love their hockey. So I do think probably closer to the time, it's a drive market basically for a lot of people right over the border, and we're doing a lot of advertising and marketing there. What I will say is this event, have either of you ever been to a World Juniors game or seen it on TV?
Seen it on TV.
Maybe
Yeah,
TV a time or
it's
two.
magical. It's like men's Final Four meets Olympics meets, boys state high school hockey. These kids are playing for their country. This is a dream come true. These are the future NHL stars. I mean, if you look at any roster, these are former World Juniors kids. The level of hockey is incredible, and just for playing for their team, and all the kids feel that way as they're playing for their country. So I urge people to purchase tickets and come out, because it is incredible. I also am fortunate enough, Debbie Estes, who is our events person. She is a magician. And the ancillary events that are always free and open to the public that she puts on, we're doing an event in Rice Park. We've got bumper cars on ice. We're doing an event inside River Center. We've got Mitch Berthume doing her market. I mean, we've got such cool things. So tickets single game tickets will be very affordable, but also just come down, and the excitement and the energy in St. Paul. We also have Team Canada playing at Mariucci, and I do think that we will have people. Their team's supposed to be good this year, so I think a lot of people just want to see Canada's team play as well. But got to sell the tickets.
It sounds like a great event. I know everybody's looking forward to it. And now we'll be in hockey season soon, so it'll start to get to be top of mind.
Right.
As we get close to the end here, what would you say is maybe the most exciting or surprising opportunity you've uncovered about Minnesota's potential and their ability to serve as a host city for funding events? Like, what's been the biggest selling point in your mind when you're out there to the Twin Cities and bringing events here?
Well, and I have kind of a dual answer. One of the things that has been surprising and wonderful is the community engagement. And what I'm talking about, the city of Minneapolis, the city of St. Paul, Meet Minneapolis, Visit St. Paul, Mall of America. When we are putting on an event, everyone comes to the table and offers and brings, everything that they can. I mean, Mall of America, every single event that we do, there is a component out at the mall, which is incredible. That has been absolutely fantastic, and I'm so appreciative of that. And I think that will only grow. One of the things with hockey is we also have this pre-tournament exhibition series in Bemidji, Mankato, Rochester, and Duluth. And sometimes we get people a little bit huffy, like, well, it's only in the metro area. This event is going to also be statewide, and that's a magical thing, and we're going to try to expand on that.
Excellent.
Hey, Wendy, we're down to the last minute, unfortunately. You could have this conversation all afternoon. But if you had one event that you could bring to Minnesota, one event that you covet, what would it be?
I'd love to do another Super Bowl. I would. But I don't know that will ever happen, because it is more difficult to do it in the winter. But it was incredible. It was absolutely incredible. Winter Olympics, but I don't know that we're ever going to get that.
Yeah. I've often thought about the Olympics. I know it's the granddaddy of all events, right? But we have all the venues here.
Right.
We've got the transportation now. There are certainly some challenges, but who knows?
Yeah, you never know. You never know.
Wendy Williams Blackshaw, you're one of my all-time favorite people. Thank you so much for being on Behind the Game this week.
Thank you guys so much. It was fun.
Yep,
Dave
thank
Boden,
you.
always a pleasure.
Thanks, Patrick. It was great. And thanks, Wendy. It was a great conversation.
Awesome.
And thank all of you for watching. We'll see you again next month on Behind the Game, presented by KLN Family Brands.